Hey Emma,
Yes, Madelyn.
what do you call it when you play a Pokemon game when you're sick?
I don't know. What do you call it?
Pikachu! Hello and welcome to Talk This.
It's dangerous to podcast alone.
I'm your very original joke host, having host Madelyn. Whoa.
I'm your hale and hearty host, Emma.
Thanks for tuning into this week's show. This week I could not think of jokes that worked with our 3-word title names. So we're going to be talking about Earth Defense Force and Pokemon Legends Arceus.
I'll give you a pass on that one since your mind is probably working slower than usual.
It's fine.
But
we're fine. Everyone's fine. I did remember to look up that it's Arceus.
Arceus, good to know.
Unless you're in Japan, unless it's Arceus there.
Why did they change it?
I read a pretty comprehensive Polygon piece in which they went through the different ways. Apparently it's because, so this comes from like the various anime movies, right? Pronunciations.
Yeah.
And at some point a director of an English Pokemon movie decided that Arceus sounded too much like arse.
Yeah.
And that's canon.
I guess that's fair.
So, Arceus, in English, only took us, every time since this game has come out, it only took us since January to figure, and it really only took us since the release of the original Diamond and Pearl games in like 2005 or whatever to figure this out. So, nice. Yeah, it's janky games week here on Talk This, huh?
Yeah.
It's the graphics cannot be good week here on Talk This. So let's talk about Earth Defense Force, EDF. Emma texted me in a panic 12 minutes ago, like, you looked up the right thing, right? And I said, what are you talking about? The natural gas company? I thought it was weird that was an old game, but here we go.
No, I had just opened the Wikipedia page so I could have it up. And at the very top it says, for the unrelated 1991 video game, see Earth Defense Force. And I was like, oh no. I hope Madelyn wasn't looking at the unrelated 1991 video game.
I was unaware of the unrelated 1991 video game, although maybe we'll have to put that back in the hat.
It's just for maximum confusion.
Replace Earth Defense Force. Well, once the new Earth Defense Force comes out, then we could do a full EDF episode.
Yeah, full Earth Defense Force episode.
Earth Defense from all angles. Anyway, Earth Defense Force is a third-person shooter series from D3, developed by all sorts of like, subsidiary work-for-hire companies, mostly Sandlot.
I believe, yeah, the main series is made by Sandlot.
That first came out for the PlayStation 2 in 2003. And they've been releasing games and spin-offs and all sorts of that since then. And Earth Defense Force 6 is slated to arrive this summer, if it's not delayed again. So Earth Defense Force is alive and well, even if you've never heard of it. A living series. It's been a while, I feel like. That may not be true. But I feel like a lot of our old games recently have been like, this died in 2009 types of series.
You do happen to get those sometimes, yes.
Yeah. So Earth Defense Force is mostly what it sounds like. There is not that much more to say about the story of these games than that. Except that there are some aliens that are discovered, and the Earth Defense Force has to kill them.
Mm-hmm.
They mostly look like bugs.
Yes.
And you gotta kill them. Those are the
big
games.
bugs.
Big bugs.
So if you have arachnophobia, this might not be the game for you. But
big bugs that in at least one game, though, the characters seem to refer to over and over again as being like very human looking and just like them, even though they're
Those
not.
are a specific type. I watched a video where they were specifically recounting this part of one of the games. Where there's a level and they start saying like, we've seen a humanoid alien, and everybody on your comms is like freaking out because they don't want to fight humans. And then when you go and actually see them, they're like giant lizards, I think, with guns. So they sure are bipedal, but do they look like humans?
I'll acknowledge that lizards look more like humans than spiders, if only marginally.
Yeah, on the scale, bipedal lizard with gun does look more like human than giant ant, but it's still pretty far down that scale. I think it's closer to giant ant than human.
Just on my humanoid slider.
Yes.
Moved it over just a little. So Earth Defense Force is this like real, I don't know if cult classic is quite the right word, although maybe some
It definitely has its dedicated cult following.
But overall, in this game, it's this mission-based gameplay where you have big, giant cityscapes full of enemies that sometimes come in waves, and you've got to defend Earth and destroy them. With increasingly kind of over-the-top weapons and destruction. And you better hope that everyone in that city is already out, because the Earth Defense Force does not care. They are here to defend the Earth, not the residents thereof.
Yeah. I think like one of the big features is like destructible buildings in this, but I'm pretty sure they're only destructible, at least in the early ones, from you, the player. So in fact, you are doing probably the most damage to the city over the giant ants.
So something that's important to know about the Earth Defense Force series is that they're actually originally a series within a much larger game series. D3 at this time was mostly concerned with churning out games for their budget simple game series. Or basically like the price is on the box. So like they had a simple 1500 series for PlayStation 1, and then they had a simple 2000 series for PS2, and then they had a simple PSP series, 2500, right? Where, like, that's what it cost in yen.
Yes, so, I was hoping you would clarify that, because I was like, that's not,
$2,000. And so they only had to sell, like, 3 copies to make back the development costs, and they had to swindle 3 people.
Yeah.
But yeah, they're a Japanese company. And so, like, most of these are, like, it's simple chess, or it's simple, like, pool, or simple checkers, right? Simple shogi. But, like, eventually they started to make all of these kind of, like, more, like, genre knockoffs, right? What you need to understand about these series is, in one interview I read with one of the guys who then went on to be a leader on the Earth Defense Force team, they were churning out 30 to 40 of these games a year.
Yes. This is the publisher.
Yes, of course. Still,
it's not one developer making 30 to 40, but yes.
Still, though.
Yes.
Gives you an idea of what we're talking about here.
Yeah, I actually thought this was really fascinating, because that's just not an area that games have anymore. They don't have like these. Well, I mean, I'm sure they do if you go looking for them, but there's certainly not companies anymore like putting out 40 budget releases a year.
Yeah, certainly not in the same way, and not in the same marketing way. Like, you might consider, I don't know, if you look at, like, the games that these kind of high-profile indie publishers put out, like, I wonder how many games that, like, Devolver puts out a year.
Not 40.
Okay, not 40. Fair enough.
Maybe 10 tops.
Okay.
Is what I would say.
That's fair. I was just like, is there anything that's even comparable now? Even if you were churning out this many games, you probably wouldn't be like, here it is, here's my budget series. In the same way. You might be like, here, I have 15 affordably priced indie games that we've produced or that we've published this year. But certainly not like this and not at this scale. And yeah, for the most part, they were pretty bad, is what I read. I mean, cheaply made, just there to make a quick buck.
I mean, they're only $15, so...
You know what, though? But, like, now, so, like, that just would not fly now, right? Like, there are plenty of great $15 indie games that get released, and everyone's like, oh, I'm gonna wait on sale for this to be $15. So I do feel like, especially now that, you know, you can find anything on the PlayStation Store or on Steam or whatever. Yeah, this sort of business model, maybe on mobile, probably still exists, but...
Yeah. It kind of feels like maybe, like, it's like as we get farther away from, like, the arcade days. Like, I can sort of imagine, like, at the time, you're like, oh, you got your new console, you go in, you pick up a $15 game to play for a few weekends, you know? And that's just sort of like a arcade light of putting your quarters in one after the other.
Yeah. Well, and there wasn't anything free to play to compete with.
Yeah.
Right? Now, if you're going to churn out something cheap like this, it's going to be a free-to-play mobile situation, probably.
Yeah.
But that's what Earth Defense Force came out of. And so Sandlot, which was, you know, one of these kind of subsidiary developers, had mostly been known for making mech games. And Earth Defense Force is still kind of a mech game, right? So, well, there are mechs that you fight, aren't there?
Yeah, but a mech game is one where you are in the mech.
No, okay, I know. I'm sorry. I just meant to say, like, to preface, they wanted to make something that was different than what they made before. And I was like, that's so interesting that, like, they make something that's different and it's still, like, there are robots all over the place. But they wanted to make something different, so they proposed this Earth Defense Force game. And then they had 6 months to make it.
Specifically 4 months, really.
Yeah.
With 2 months for debugging set aside.
It's probably not enough months. Or the perfect amount of months, depending on how you feel about this game.
Well, I mean, the idea of the simple series is that they're supposed to be super simple, right? So theoretically, yeah, maybe that's enough if you're making, like, solitaire, you know? But Earth Defense Force was a little bit farther beyond the scope than simple series had been before that on the whole. And in fact, their original pitch or, like, idea that they made in cooperation with the publisher was, like, a combination mech and big shoot-'em-up thing. And, like, there was a vote and half the people thought they should pass on it and half the people thought they should go on it just based on the scale of it. So they ended up saying, please cut, like, half of this and then make it for us.
And they did.
And they did.
And I don't know if you read either of the interviews on Polygon with the development team. You must have, because I feel like that anecdote is from that interview.
Yes.
I thought it was fascinating. They were just like, and then the publisher just left us alone. I didn't take a single meeting that whole 4 months. I was like, wow, that is not how it goes now, I'm sure.
No, yeah. I mean, I wonder if they had to be like, yes, we're still on schedule, but they didn't have to give, like, whole meetings on, like, their design and what they wanted to do with the game and stuff like that. Which, man, that sounds nice. I mean, it sounds busy and awful in some ways, but also, man, sounds nice to not have to do meetings.
Yeah. So, Earth Defense Force, was a sort of a surprise hit for the series. Sold really well. They continued to make more. First two were meaningfully only Japan releases, even though they had some, like, very limited Western availability. Just Europe, yeah. But basically, as they started to prepare for the third game, they had just released in Europe, and they were hoping to target the West. And then I thought it was so funny that the in the interview with the director, he was like, basically Sony North America was like, we don't want bad games.
Yeah. I also, in a video, I saw some speculation that maybe it was a little bit that America didn't want games about skyscrapers exploding in the early 2000s.
Okay, so that's also fair.
Yeah.
I did see that noted in a few reviews, and I guess I should have clocked that a little bit more, as like why people were mentioning that so much.
I imagine the main reason was because Sony in America was being very sticklery about buggy games, but I imagine the fact that they had that in it made it so they didn't want to like fight for it to get through anyway or anything like that.
So this is probably a good time to talk about kind of the appeal or lack of appeal of Earth Defense Force, which is...
Well, wait, I think the third game is so funny too, though, because they really just threw it all in at the West, because it was an Xbox exclusive, which, if you don't know, that is not a system that exists in Japan.
Yeah.
Really?
Only in this generation has Xbox even begun to get the sliver of a toehold in Japan, really.
Yeah, the developers talked a little bit that, like, there's still some talk at the time that Microsoft was going to try to do more push into Japan, but yeah, they decided to make the third one not part of the Simple series. It was its own thing for once.
So they could charge full price.
Yes, they could charge full price, and they really just pushed it in the West. But apparently, they got a very large majority of Japan's Xbox owners to buy it. Of some
60%.
Tiny infinitesimal number.
60%! Can you imagine? Yeah. That's crazy.
Yeah. Yeah, it had, apparently there was an active install base of 200,000 consoles in Japan, and it sold 130,000 copies. So, pretty impressive for that.
If only there had been more Xboxes.
Yeah. Anyway, I just thought that was funny that they just, like, once they could get it into America, they were just like, yeah, let's do it.
Yeah. So, you may be wondering, listener, as someone who's not familiar with Earth Defense Force, well, that's weird. A game that was on to its, second sequel, but Sony thought it was too crappy to release. What a strange thing. To which I'll say, that's pretty much what these games are. Every single review that I read compared them to a B movie. And that, I think, is not just because... it has the kind of Godzilla, schlocky, sci-fi vibes, but because of the, unique sort of, so bad it's good quality of this.
Well, I think it's very much not concerned with the types of things that modern video games are now concerned with.
Yes.
Like realism, or graphics,
plot,
or performance,
frame rate.
Well, yeah, that's what performance is. I feel like it's a mistake to say, it's bad at that. I just don't think they care very much about it. The ethos of Earth Defense Force is, how much stuff can we put on your screen? And that is sort of how the games are made, and that's sort of the appeal of it. Is how much stuff can there be going on at once in front of you for it to be, cool. And everything else that's affected by that is sort of secondary.
A gamer's game, to quote 2007 Eurogamer. Which I was like, I guess that does sum it up. Except
I think that's kind of fair, yeah. It's not concerned with being cinematic or realistic, like I said, or anything like that. Colliders, normal physics, no. 200 ants on your screen.
Not 200 ants. 100. There was a direct quote from one of the guys who was like, If somebody says we're going to need 200 ants on the screen instead of 100, I'll probably do it. I don't think we need that many. I think that's too much, and I think we'll have more stable games in the future. But if somebody says we need it, we'll probably do it.
Yeah.
I was like, you go, dude. I also really liked, I think the quote that really sums it up from this development team is, so it goes, from my perspective, if I ask the player if they want a very stable and conservative gameplay experience, or something extraordinary with some technical issues, which game would they prefer? I think the latter is more appealing. Yeah, you do, dude. You didn't even have to say that. We know that that's what you didn't have to clarify your answer.
Yeah. And I think that's the sort of idea that made it into a cult hit as opposed to, like, something that is a classic in everybody's minds, because it's just something that you either are really into or something that you just can't deal with, I think.
Do you feel like there's a space for games like this today? I don't mean for Earth Defense Force.
They're still making them.
So I don't mean for Earth Defense Force specifically. Earth Defense Force has carved out its niche, right? And even though they continue to, like, they've made more efforts in the more recent games in ways that people have not always actually appreciated, to be honest, to be, like, graphically slightly better or slightly more modern or whatever. But obviously, like, this game has the legacy of that kind of, like, schlocky B-movie stuff and can continue to trade on that, and obviously there's a space for that. I just mean, for these, and you're right, that's so bad it's good is not quite right, but these, a game that is unconcerned with performance specifically and graphics specifically, like, is that something that you could make today?
I feel like from within my, social media bubble, I tend to get an impression that there is some fatigue with, like, cinematic type games.
Yeah.
But continuing obsession with graphics. I mean, there's certainly a crowd that the whole, like, I want shorter games with worse graphics where people are paid more money. It's like, well, yes, of course. But there very much is, like, a whole, like, culture in games around, like, FPS and ray tracing and all that sort of stuff that I don't understand.
Well,
that I feel like graphics and, like, realistic, like, physics and stuff is still something that modern gamers really highly value. So you can certainly make a gameplay focused game, but you might have to put more effort into the presentation of it.
Yeah, it's interesting to me. While something feels very true about describing this game that is really just about, like, blowing stuff up and who cares if it looks bad, being described as a gamer's game is, on one hand, that rings incredibly true, right? On the other hand, in the year of our Lord 2022, it feels like the kind of people for whom this game would have been very appealing in, like, 2005 are now the kind of people who are often quite concerned with graphics and or frame rate. And that specific, like, type of gamer now would not accept something that runs quite as badly as Earth Defense Force. And that makes it hard to peg like, who would a game like this be for now, who isn't already kind of, like, invested in the series or knows this series has hype, right? Could you release a game that looks like quite this, like, thrown together anymore and not just be absolutely roasted? It feels to me like no. Maybe, 7 years down the line, people would go back and be like, yeah, Mars Attack World is a really good game, actually, if you can get past the tech. But
I feel like there is still sometimes like a primal joy in, like, lots of stuff on screen, though.
That's true. I mean, that's what the Warriors series is, right?
Yeah.
It is a fine line to walk, though. I mean, you wonder if these guys knew that what they were making was something that would be... I mean, I think they have to have, right? The pressure's off when you're making a game that's only $20.
Yeah.
But, you know, you wonder how intentional it was. Is it just that, like, they just had to throw it together and it couldn't run that well and that's just how it was? Or, like, did anybody think, like, yes, this will be better for being kind of crappy?
I don't know if they put that much thought into it.
I mean, yeah, that's fair.
Hindsight thing. Anyway, I think that Pokemon Legends Arceus 2 should have 100 alpha Pokemon on screen.
No.
At the same time, chasing you.
Maybe more Pokemon on screen at a time, but no more alpha Pokemon, please.
No, I want them all, like, you get, like a horde of them, like a herd.
Right. Survival
and you
mode.
have to, like, run away when they notice you.
That'd be pretty good. A horde, that'd be pretty good. I will say, you know, the Pokemon series is, in some ways, like, and I say this as someone who, like, really does not care that much about graphics, right? The Pokemon series, it does come, like, the closest of many series that I can think of to that sort of seeming flagrant disregard for graphics and performance.
I feel a little bit different about Pokemon.
I do too. I'm just mentioning the parallels here.
Yeah.
But continue.
In terms of, like, I wonder how much of it is just, like, they know it will make money, and so they do not give them enough development time to worry about that sort of stuff.
But see, that overlap, like, that's the legacy of the Simple series, isn't it? Like, I mean, it's not the legacy, it's totally different, I understand. But, like, it's not that different, right? They're like,
I guess
we'll make money.
I guess so.
Churn it out there, just on a different scale.
Yeah.
Anyway, I'll come back to the graphics in Pokemon Legends Arceus here, but suffice it to say, did I say Arceus? Is it Arceus? It's Arceus.
Arceus.
Now it's the vowel sound that I'm messing up. Arceus, Arceus. Who did this to me? Anyway, the graphics are bad. They really are that bad. But it's a fun game, and it came out this January for the Nintendo Switch.
Yeah.
And it's, you know, Breath of the Wild Pokemon.
Yeah.
They did the trailer thing, so it's always going to be Breath of the Wild
Every
Pokemon.
game does the trailer thing now. Every game has the freaking cliff looking out over nature.
When I dodge rolled off a cliff in this game, I almost died. So I feel like it's bad advertising. Where's my glider? You're right. We can't call it Breath of the Wild Pokemon because you fly on a Pokemon. Do you? I actually don't know if you get to fly.
There is a glider Pokemon, yes.
Oh. I feel like that doesn't count.
Anyway, if you're here saying, like, what are they talking about? Pokemon is just Pokemon. Pokemon Legends Arceus. I feel like that was still wrong.
It was right. You're good.
Is an evolution in the Pokemon format.
Ha ha ha.
Where it's a isekai. I mean, it's not. You go to the past. I don't know if that really counts.
People who haven't heard of the Pokemon game, Emma, are not going to know what that means. To be like, that was not a helpful.
You're a normal child that teen. God says
you're a teen now. Usually in
you're
Pokemon,
a teen. You're a normal teen, and God comes down to you and says, "Here's my God phone. Anyway, you need to go into the past and help the people of the past learn about Pokemon." And so, because it is in the past, they haven't quite figured out, you know, all of, like, the traditions of the Pokemon world, like gyms and tall grass and such.
Computers.
And computers, yeah. So you are helping out, like, this expedition of people explore this new, it's the Hisui region, mm-hmm. right? The Hisui region. And learn about learn about the Pokemon there, and how to interact with them.
The people in this region, I cannot be clearer, are incompetent.
Well, they're like new there. They're Team Galactic, right?
Team Galaxy. I think they become
Team
Team
Galaxy.
Galactic. Or the Galaxy team. I think they may be Team Galactic in Diamond by that point.
Pre-evil.
Yeah.
Arc, I assume. But they're clearly there just to, like, on an expedition, and there's also, like, people who are actually indigenous to the area that you interact with as well.
Yes.
So it sort of makes sense that they're incompetent, because they're, like...
Colonizers, yes.
Colonizers. Yeah. Yeah.
No, I just mean, like, all of these people are scared to death of Pokemon. Like,
well, what if someone was like, here, go throw this ball at a black bear?
Right. I'm not saying that there's not some fear to be had, but it's just like, these people, it doesn't make sense. Like, theoretically, like, they talk about some of them being from Kanto, which is the original, like, the Pokemon region of Red, Blue, and Yellow. Mm-hmm. And it's like, even if this is from, like, a proto-Kanto before, like, gyms and stuff, like, these people do talk about in that region, people, like, doing Pokemon battles. It's like, folks, you came here on, like, a colonizing mission. Like, you can't be afraid of Bidoof. You can't be like, I can catch one Pokemon at best. You can't be like, you can't say to me, at most, people can carry 6 Pokemon at a time. Not that anyone's ever been able to do that. Like, what?
That's especially funny since this whole game is, like, just a catch-a-thon, basically. Yeah. So, the main difference, I think, more than, like, the open world or the free-range Pokemon that's in Arceus.
Which is something that was sort of introduced in Sword and Shield, although in a different way.
You just chuck Pokeballs at
I meant
Sword and Shield?
Pokemon ranging around freely in the wild area.
Yes, that's sort of an evolution of the wild area. But the way that this sort of gameplay works is, rather than, like, I mean, you still build the team, but rather than, like, building a team and taking on, like, gym leaders, you're doing research, right? So that's just a lot of like, observing Pokemon, observing the natural environment, and catching a whole bunch of the same type of Pokemon as well, so that they can be brought back to town and, like, observed, I guess. So rather than, like, you know, you catch a new Pokemon and then you don't catch that same Pokemon ever again, you're catching, like, all the Pokemon of the same type over and over and over again. And sort of to facilitate this, there's a less emphasis on battling the wild Pokemon, in that a lot of Pokemon you can just chuck a Pokeball at from the open field and catch them that way without necessarily entering a battle with them. So it's a little bit more of an emphasis on actually, like, moving around, and being able to sneak up on Pokemon, being able to deal with Pokemon that charge you, some very basic AI that they've put into these Pokemon to make them a little bit difficult to catch in that way.
Yeah, and then so you're filling out your paper Pokédex with these research tasks, which include catching certain amounts, or battling certain amounts, or seeing them use certain moves, or that sort of thing, evolving them. And you also have a ton of, like, little side quests that people in the world can give you. So they might want to see, like, a giant specimen of a certain Pokemon, or they might want to see that you've finished the research tasks for a certain Pokemon, or there's Bidoof running around the village and you gotta find them because they're wreaking havoc, chewing on things. Like, all sorts of little side quest things. Which is I think, a good thing. The side quests are pretty tedious, mostly, but we all know how I feel about a checklist, and this game is really just all checklists. So I can't complain too much about that, and it's nice to see that the Pokemon NPCs get some little thing to do that isn't saying the same thing over and over and over again to you.
Yeah, as someone who did not finish Sword and Shield, I think I had Shield. Someone who did not finish Shield, and has not played this game, I have sort of mixed feelings about this sort of gameplay shift, because it felt like a lot of the appeal of Pokemon before this game, like the mainline Pokemon games, is like you catch a lot of Pokemon and you name them.
Yeah.
And you evolve them and you take them to the daycare, they're like, and you feed them curry in Shield. And you hang out with them. So it feels more like that was like about companionship. Whereas this is just sort of like it's like a big safari area in like the older Pokemons, where you just go out and like catch them as like a sort of sporting thing. And I get you still have a team, I guess, and you can still nickname them, but it's not as special when you catch a Pokemon because you're constantly catching them.
Yeah.
You'll catch like hundreds of Pokemon in this without like even like trying to complete your Pokédex.
On the flip side, I think this game would be awful if catching the Pokemon was harder than it is.
Oh yeah. No, I mean the fundamental design is what's changed that I have conflicts about. If they didn't change the fundamental design, then I wouldn't have been like, they couldn't do this, right? Because it's the whole design is different.
Overall, though, for me, it's exciting to see the series trying something, right? Certainly, Pokemon is certainly a series you can accuse of being somewhat complacent with their design aesthetic and their design choices. And this is definitely a bold reimagining. And it's one that, while I don't think that I would be clamoring... So I've played maybe 4 or 5 hours of this, and my boyfriend has played a lot more because he's the one who actually started it earlier. I only started it this week. I'll be interested to see where they continue to go with this style of play, because I don't think, like, unlike in kind of the classic Pokemon games where it's like, yeah, like, I don't know, it's got enough of a hook and having some new Pokemon is fun enough that, like, I don't mind too much that it's sort of the same game over and over again. With Arceus, I'm not sure that I would want another one unless they were going to do it a lot better than this. Especially having played Pokemon Snap. And look, this is not a 100% fair comparison at all, because obviously in Pokemon Snap you are on the rails taking photos and it's like very scripted, right? So I don't expect that. And I think we talked about this when we talked about open world games on a side quest earlier this year a little bit. But the world is just not interesting enough. And I would personally trade having like this gigantic world for a slightly tighter but more like robust or interestingly scripted kind of situation. Because I think, well, there's a lot in various reviews that are like, this Pokemon game is more challenging than others. And, like, that's sort of true. The battles are a little harder than I remember early battles being in any of the other games. I am seeing, like, this is definitely going to be a game that's going to scratch a certain itch for me, and that I can, like, pick it up for 45 minutes and feel that I've achieved something. And I don't discount that. But it's not a game that I'm going to want to, like, I don't know. It's definitely grindy.
Yes. I think part of the reason why it seems more difficult at the start is also because it's open and doesn't really block you off from a lot of places. There's a couple places you can't go until you get like a surf or climb or something. But other than that, it's pretty easy to wander into an area that is a way higher level than you are, which is not something you could really do in Pokemon before. Not even with, like, the wild area, because usually they would have, like, cities blocking your progress along the way.
Yeah.
So that's part of what makes it more difficult. It's like, it does feel like It does feel like there's lots of cool ideas there, but also Game Freak has to make, like, a Pokemon or more a year.
Yeah.
And I feel like that shows in this, in that it feels like they had a lot of ambition and, like, had, like, a year and a half to make it off of, like, the Sword and Shield DLC.
Well, I'd really like to see them take this and put it into a more standard-looking Pokemon map, to be honest. I think that, and, you know, obviously I say this as someone for whom giant open worlds are not always, like, my jam, but I think that that would allow much more, like, compact but interesting movement or, like, specific challenges, as opposed to just sort of feeling like I'm running around all over the place and I'm chucking Pokeballs. Like, I'd like for this to feel, and I'm sure that there will be some of this as I get deeper into the game, but I'd like for it to feel like perhaps a little more strategic. And in a way that would justify the villagers' outright terror of the Pokemon a lot more. Like, right now it just feels like, what the heck are you scared of? I'm, like, throwing Pokeballs all over the place, catching these Pokemon. Like, I'm not doing anything. You could do this, you, like, you know, little wimps.
I assume they all went out and immediately ran into, like, the Alpha Snorlax.
Right, I did go out and immediately run into the Alpha Snorlax, by the way, so that was terrifying.
Yes, the other thing this thing adds is there are these, like, alpha Pokemon wandering around that have, like, red eyes and will chase you and try to kill you if they see you.
Which, those are good. I think those are good. But yeah, I'd like to see this a version that not goes, like, more stealth game, but kind of. Like, it's like, if the game of this is gonna be, like, there's not as much battling and there's a lot more movement, the movement's gotta be better. And there's got to be more strategy to it. It can't just be like...
Have you done any of the boss battles yet?
No, I haven't, but I've seen Click Like Boyfriend do them, and they don't look fun.
They do not look fun, yeah.
So that too. It's like, okay, maybe there can be boss battles, but they seem like they've got to be better done.
Yes.
Basically, so many exciting ideas here. I hope that they do them better next time and not the same.
Well, there's already more Pokemon coming out this year.
I know.
So, we'll see.
Unclear though. Like, will they take this into that, or will they?
I've only seen, like, the initial announcement trailer for Scarlet and Violet. I don't know if there's been more information from since then. But my main takeaways were Spain. Character models are kind of scary.
That's fine.
And that's all I got from it, really.
Well, I hope that they continue to iterate on this, because I do think this is an exciting direction for the series.
I think it would be nice if Game Freak could just take a year off and, like... Because I feel like the reason we're not seeing a lot of, like, innovation in graphics is, like, they had to make their 3D one, and now they don't have time to upgrade any of that because they're working on, like, systems and stuff.
Yeah.
So I feel like if they could just let them take a year off and work on one game, you know?
I don't care that much about the graphics, though. I mean, look, they are bad. Let's not mince words. They are pretty bad. But the graphics could be bad if, like, the rest of it was a little tighter, you know?
Well, that's not just, like, they don't have time for polish.
No,
There's no time in their development cycle for them to polish things. They just have to, like, do it, and then it's done, and then they're on to the next thing, is how I imagine it goes.
Yeah.
Because I don't know how they make these on the time frame that they make them, to be perfectly honest.
Well, 2 months for debugging, 4 months for design,
exactly,
right?
Yeah.
Anyway, don't let this dissuade, like, listeners, I would still encourage you to play this game. I've been enjoying it. It's fun. Emma, I don't think you would like it very much, but you might.
No,
I don't know.
I don't think so. I mean, I think it's probably not a good Pokemon to start with, if it is somehow your first Pokemon.
Yeah, that's valid. Probably I would do Sword and Shield. If you've somehow never played Pokemon before.
Somebody.
I guess. But it's fun, and I'm excited to continue playing it, and I'll report back on more next week. So do you think we can mash these two together?
Yeah, like I said, there's a horde of alpha Pokemon. And all you've got are scent balls to chuck at them.
Yeah. Or like, it's the Pokemon from space who are arriving now.
That is kind of just all the legendary Pokemon, isn't it?
I guess many of them are.
They're just like gods, essentially, aren't they?
Some of them. I mean, Arceus is a god. I don't think all of the legendary Pokemon are space gods.
Well, some of them are like biomanufactured, aren't they? Like Mew.
Right. Well, Mew... I can't remember if Mew is... Like, Mewtwo definitely is. I can't remember if Mew is a naturally occurring Pokemon or if it's a lab thing also.
Well, Mewtwo, then.
Yeah, but it's like, I can't remember. It's like, the legendary birds, like, from space. Like, I don't think they are. I could be wrong, though. Ho and Lugia might be, but I don't think that that Moltres, Zapdos, and Articuno are.
I don't know. I'm not really all that familiar with Pokemon lore.
Yeah.
Arceus is definitely like the god of time.
But Arceus like is the Pokemon god. Like, yes.
Yes.
So then just all of the space Pokemon come. Or we go to space and we have to colonize the moon with our Pokemon.
I don't know. I don't know about that.
Like, it's like a twist because, like, instead of it, you're on the Earth Defense Force and you're defending the Earth. Instead, you are arriving on Earth with your Pokemon. And everyone is scared of you.
See, that would make more sense.
Yeah.
What if they had, like, you know, you come from the giant hole in the sky, and also the Pokemon came from the giant hole in the sky? Now, that would be scary.
That would be very scary.
I don't think they would welcome you into their village in that case.
I don't either. I think that the reception would be quite different. Are you even allowed to make a mashup in which one of the games is a Pokemon game where there aren't Pokemon?
It's just like any sort of monster racing game.
Right. I mean, I like your horde of Pokemon. I'm just trying to come up with if there's anything else.
You raise monsters to fight other monsters. So, like, you live in this village, right?
Okay.
And every once in a while, it comes under siege from, like, these monsters that live in the wilderness,
Okay.
right? And so one day you're like, what if we tried to catch some of these monsters when they were little and, like, raise them as our own and use them as, like, defenders of our village from the other ones. So, like, there's this monster raising element where you have all these monsters that you're raising to be better defenders, and then every once in a while, like, a horde comes upon you and you have to deal with it through, you know, your monster raising. And maybe we could add some of your own ingenuity, you know?
Right.
Like your village defenses.
Too. Yeah. Okay, so you're proposing, like, an even prequel or, like, you go even further back into the past of Pokemon situation.
Yeah, I mean, it doesn't have to be a Pokemon
right,
game.
But if it were a Pokemon, it would be, like, the first Pokemon people. Interesting. I like that. And the graphics, it runs at, like, 6 frames per second.
Yes. To emulate the chaos of battle, obviously.
Or it could just be a Pokemon shooter.
Yeah, what's that game? That game that's always on Twitter where the Pokemon creatures are, like, making guns?
Yeah, I don't actually know.
Pal World? Is that what it is?
Yeah, gun Pokemon.
Man, when does that game come out? I don't want to play it, but I think it's so funny and weird.
Feels
it is
like
Pal World.
It's gotta be Vaporware, right?
I don't know. It sort of seems like they're very, like, in tongue-in-cheek about it. I don't know. So I don't know if it's Vaporware. Seems like a terrible idea, but...
Well, look forward to our game about Pokemon destroying a city near you. Well, you pit brother against brother. Soon. But in the meantime, folks, have you played Pokemon Legends Arceus, and do you feel like it moves the series forwards, backwards, or sideways? Have you played Earth Defense Force? And do you feel like it deserves cult classic or just cult following? And is it so bad it's good? Or is it just so thrown together that it's cool? Or have you played another game like these two that's like kind of janky, but you love it anyway, and maybe you love it because of that jank? If you have thoughts on any of this or anything else that we talked about on today's episode, hit us up on social media. We are on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube at Talk This Podcast. You can also visit our website, www.talkthispodcast.com, where you can learn all about the show, check out the games that are in the hat, and read our blog, featuring long-running series Split Screen and Click Big Boyfriend. And perhaps most importantly, if you enjoyed the show, you should subscribe. We are on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Stitcher, TuneIn, Spotify, Pandora Podcasts, online on the app, Overcast, Pocket Casts, anywhere that you can find podcasts. Anywhere you found this podcast today, you can find Talk This. Next week, it's 6 weeks in gaming already, isn't it?
7 weeks, even.
7 weeks in gaming. Man, I feel like it got here in a snap, but it's been 7 weeks. Wow, I have so little to talk about.
It's okay. I can just talk the whole time. It's fine.
So tune in next time for our side quest, where we'll talk about what we've been playing. But Emma, what's up for 2 weeks from now? What are the games?
I replaced the ones in the hat this time,
Whoa.
which was good, because there was only 3 left in each one.
Whoa!
So, yeah, that wouldn't have been a fun, I just usually put them all in, even when some of them's been done before.
Right.
So sometimes I have to
reroll 3 times.
hit the online randomizer button 4 times. Anyway, our old game is going to be Bastion.
Nice. Okay, I actually have already played that, so here we go.
Easy week for you, Madelyn.
Yeah.
And our new game is going to be Sifu.
Seafood? No, I'm just kidding. I heard
Sifu.
you. I heard you. I'm sorry.
Okay.
Oysters. Fried clams.
Yes, it's a game where it's a brutally, hard game where you must make precise movements to cook the fish correctly.
You work at a high-end omakase
and every time you fail, you get a little bit older, and you continue to fail to open your restaurant.
Brutal. Well, look forward to that in 2 weeks, and to our side quests next week, and to many more side quests and many more main quests after that. But that brings us to the end of this week's show. Thanks so much for listening. Emma, do you have a sign-off?
This week, I hope that you only come across a couple giant ants.